Good morning, everyone. Isn't it a fabulous day? Love seeing the red buds opening. My name is Jan Conley. I've been a member of this congregation for 18 years now. I can hardly believe it. And much like A.J. Combs and Kyle spoke of Googling to find this church, I did too. But I Googled, where's humanism practiced? And that's how I found this church. And I love the inquiring minds and the dynamic, inspiring people that are here. So this is what I found. Our church is a place where you're free to be you, no matter the color of your skin, no matter whom you love, no matter your gender, no matter your age, no matter your socioeconomic status, no matter where your spiritual journey is taking you. So, bring your questioning mind, bring your expansive heart, bring your entire self to this beloved community. As we begin our service, we hope that you'll make sure to read the announcements and the inserts in today's order of service, where you can find information that's important, especially if you're new to First U. The flowers today are given by Jara Cox in memory of her amazing daughter, whose memorial service was yesterday. Very moving. You will notice that we do not pass the offering plate here at First Church. That's because we believe it is the responsibility of the members and contributing friends to fund our ministry, not our guests. As a guest, we'd rather you to simply relax and enjoy your experience with us at First U. That said, if you do feel moved to make a contribution, everyone will find instructions on how to do that on today's insert. Following the service today, those interested in learning about Unitarian Universalism or First Church are invited to the first of a three-part series, April 7th, 14th, and 21st. And those sessions are informational and educational and strongly encouraged for visitors, especially those considering membership here in our church. The class takes place in the Fisher Room, to which an usher can direct you after you've grabbed a bite to eat at our potluck offering today. So now it's time to greet our neighbors. Before we begin our service, let's take a moment to wave to those people who are watching from home, then rise and greet your neighbors.
Curveball. Now that you said we don't pass the plate, we are passing the plate.
Yes, right. I'll point that out. Yeah, right. Okay, if you'd return to your seats, please. Doug Gerard will be lighting our chalice this morning with these words. Come, enter this beloved community. Let its spirit fill your soul. Let its fellowship bring you comfort. Let yourself rest in its sacred time and space. Take refuge here. Grow here. Be challenged here. Enter this beloved community. Come. Our first hymn this morning is number 318 in the gray hymnal, We Would Be One. Our message for all ages this morning is entitled, I Wonder, by Annika Harris, and will be shared with us by Joe Ellen. And Jackson, thank you.
The problem is I can't get up if I get down on there. It's just the way it is. You know. Okay, Jackson, will you show them the picture? All right, that says I Wonder by Annika Harris, illustrated by John Rowe. And Jackson's going to show you the pictures. It's time to turn it on. Eva loves to look for the moon. It follows her from place to place, disappearing behind trees and mountains and then appearing again someplace new. Look, Mama, there it is. The moon looks so beautiful in the sky. How do you think it follows us, Eva? Eva thinks about it, but she just can't figure it out. It's okay to say I don't know, says her mother. When we don't know something, we get to wonder about it. I wonder if the moon and Earth are friends, says Eva. Her mother smiles. I like that idea. But Mama, how does the moon really stay close to us? Well, there's an invisible force called gravity that pulls the things in the universe together, Eva's mother explains. Gravity keeps the moon close to the Earth and keeps the planets close to the sun, too. They circle around like this. Yeah. We're going to have a solar eclipse that's going to tell us even more. Eva understands a little better, then she starts to wonder, Mama, where does gravity come from? I don't know, Eva. Nobody really knows for sure. And when no one knows the answer to something, it's called a mystery. A mystery is something for everyone to wonder about together. How fun! Eva imagines herself wondering about gravity together with all the people in the world. Eva watches the moon disappear behind the clouds as she walks, excited to see where it will appear next. How many grains of sand are in the whole world, Mama? I wonder about that too. There are trillions and trillions of grains of sand, but nobody knows exactly how many. Eva tries to think about all the sand in the world. It feels so big that I can't fit it all in my imagination. It makes me feel dizzy, like I'm falling. I know what you mean, her mother agrees, and I'm sure other people feel that way too. Eva walks down another path, looking for the moon, and a little orange butterfly appears. Then she notices there are butterflies everywhere. Mama, where did all of these butterflies come from? These butterflies have been flying around for a few days. But they started out as little caterpillars, and these caterpillars came from eggs, and those eggs came from other butterflies. There are cycles around us, with one thing ending and another beginning. Things are always changing. Do you think of other things that change? Clouds, frogs, and me. Later, Eva wonders, Mama, what was here before all the butterflies and frogs and clouds, before everything? I don't know, answers her mother. It's another mystery. I like trying to imagine what was here before the beginning of everything. What do you think was here? And Eva says, smiling, I don't know. She thinks about it for a long time, and then she has an idea. I wonder if there were feelings. As she walks home, Eva sees the moon again, glowing brightly above the roof of her house. Let's go inside and look for the moon through the window. We're done. So do you have wonders? Do you think, are there things you wonder about? I wonder how we grow. Do you wonder about something? Talk to Mommy and Daddy about what you wonder about, or just think about it. Thank you.
All right, I have to correct something I said before, and that was that we don't pass the plate. Well, we do once a month. Okay, so this month's recipient for our Share the Plate collection is Cincinnati Recycling and Reuse Hub. I love the place. I go there very often, and I've gotten 3 of my neighbors to be involved too. the collection house for these recycling things is at my place. And once a month, I go with a neighbor down there. Well, we're going to have a video now, and after viewing the video, which will introduce you to the hub, the ushers will pass the plate to take up this morning's collection for the hub. Alternately, you will find other ways to donate to the Share the Plate for this month or for First Church on this morning's insert. And I even called one time and asked, I said, I skipped last month's Share the Plate. Is there a way that I can still contribute to that? And I was told yes, but that was on the website. Okay, so the ushers will pass the plate now, and we will have a music reflection during that time, which is a little out of order from what's in your order of service.
Our focus is to accept items that cannot be recycled curbside. This includes things like plastic bags, clamshell containers, electronics, batteries, styrofoam, oral care and deodorant products and packaging, twist ties, corks, tires, e-media, and yes, even your dirty Swiffer pads. Over 377 tons of materials have been processed for recycling or reuse since the hub first opened in 2021. This includes over 117 tons of electronics, nearly 5 tons of light bulbs and batteries, and over 75 tons of plastics unable to be recycled curbside. The majority of our funding comes through individual donations. The hub is also supported by grants, sponsorships, and recycling fees, as well as some other programs like TerraCycle. We are primarily volunteer-based with just 12 paid employees.
Hi, I'm Colleen McSwiggan, and I'm the Executive Director and Recycler-in-Chief for the Cincinnati Recycling and Reuse Hub.
Your financial support allows us to process materials like these, which could not be recycled curbside.
And your support literally keeps the lights on. Support also comes from volunteers who help us sort and process materials like these that will go to TerraCycle, which helps us earn a little bit of money. Volunteers can also help us sort materials that will go to other nonprofits, like these jeans that will go to Blue Jeans Go Green to be turned into insulation for houses.
Volunteers also assist us when we are closed to the public by processing, sorting, and organizing reuse materials for our 4th floor reuse shop.
Our next hymn this morning is number 1021 in the teal hymnal, Lean on Me. Please turn to it and rise as you are able. I think we need a couple tambourines for that one, and maybe a couple of others that we sing. We got at least 2 people in here every Sunday who can keep a beat. It's an honest question. I can't. So you don't want a tambourine in my hands. But maybe if we just had a couple lying around from time to time, we could spice it up. So the motive for this morning's sermon, which is entitled Ubuntu, is something that just reflects an interest I have over the course of my life and my studies. I've always been weaving in and out of my awareness this contrast between the Western world in which we live and the Eastern world, quote unquote, in which we don't live, but also the remnants of the tribal hunter-gatherer societies that are still dotted throughout the planet. And I think about the difference between these 3 different categories of culture, and it's always remarkable to me when I think about this difference to sort of realize how different we in the West live in the world than Eastern cultures or tribal cultures. One of those differences, and there are many of them, is the way that our particular way of being in the world, I believe, has separated us from nature, separated us from the rhythms of life, separated us from the wisdom rooted in the experience of being integral to the whole. Our Western culture has become very rational, very scientific, very technological, very capable of producing for itself, and I think we've lost our sense of that connection And there's a lot of wisdom in that connection that is lost to us as we have separated ourselves from it. And so what I'm sharing with you this morning is my reflection on this, at least part of my reflection on this, with an encouragement for us to maybe take a pause as Western people and think a little bit more about our place in the world, how we think about ourselves, how we participate in the world, juxtaposed against other cultures. And this morning we're looking at tribal cultures from Africa who have this concept of Ubuntu. And so I'm going to share this with you this morning, and by the time I'm done, hopefully it'll be obvious why I've chosen to do this. And I want to start with a reading. And the reading is entitled, "Is Human Nature Fundamentally Selfish or Altruistic?" by Maya Shvalovitz. Maya writes, "Sifu was part of the Mbuti tribe, for whom hunts were collective efforts, in which each hunter's success belonged to everybody else." She details how the tribe employed long nets of twined liana bark to catch their prey. Sometimes they would stretch these nets for 300 feet. And once the nets were hung, women and children would begin shouting, yelling, and beating the ground to frighten animals toward the nets. This was a group effort for almost everyone. But one man, a rugged individualist named Sifu, had other ideas. When no one was looking, Sifu slipped away to set up his own net in front of everybody else's net. And he was soon caught in this blatant attempt to steal meat, and he was brought in front of the whole tribe. At an impromptu trial, Sifu defended himself with arguments for individual initiative and personal responsibility. He felt he deserved a better place in the line of nets. After all, he was one of the more important men in the tribe. In fact, he considered himself a chief. Thought he kind of ran his own band and could do what he wanted. But if that were the case, replied a respected member of the camp, maybe you should leave us and go be chief of your own tribe and never come back. The Mbuti have no chiefs. They're a society of equals in which redistribution governs everyone's livelihood. Redistribution governs everyone's livelihood, not a Western concept. The rest of the camp sat in silent agreement. And faced with banishment, a punishment nearly equivalent to a death sentence, Sifu finally relented. He apologized, handed over his meat to the tribe, and then essentially was sent to bed without his dinner. Selfishness is considered a vice in such tribal groups, which still live in ways similar to our hunter-gatherer ancestors. Indeed, every such group ever studied has been found to idealize altruism while punishing selfishness, in everything from their mythologies to their mating practices. End of reading. So when I consider Sifu's story, I consider it a story that highlights the tension between personal benefit and the common good. And common good isn't a phrase you hear much anymore these days here in the West, is it? We seem to be a lot more about personal benefit than we seem to be about the common good. So what's the common good about? Well, Sifu's story gives an answer. If the common good is the quintessential value, redistribution governs everybody's lives. Redistribution is the equal sharing of resource to everyone, regardless of your place in the tribe. But this isn't how our world works here in the West, is it? No. So here are a few Sifu-like parallels that I could draw as I was thinking this through yesterday. It seems in every direction we turn, we can see how we are sacrificing the common good for the benefit of certain individuals or corporations, which today apparently are individuals, if you believe the Supreme Court, right? So here's an example. The business world sacrifices the common good for the sake of personal or corporate gain. True? What is the most recent egregious example of this in the business world? The pop quiz. Social media. Social media seems to care little for the common good and a great deal about its stock price. Healthcare. Healthcare in the service of lobbyists who work to benefit from the for-profit healthcare industry, which is antithetical to a healthcare industry that exists for the common good. Educational resources. We now live in a country where we publicly fund for-profit charter schools. And there are many layers to that onion, not least of all of which is racism. But that's another sermon for another time. So there are no shortages of examples like Sifu in our culture today. I think it took me about 5 minutes to come up with these three, and you probably all have some more in your head. So I think about Sifu relative to his tribe, and I'm like, what motivates someone like Sifu to be a Sifu? What motivates somebody in such a context to sacrifice the common good for their own personal gain? You don't have to ask this question about Sifu. We see it all about us here in the West, don't we? What motivates someone to do that? I have a theory, but before I tell you my theory, I wonder if you have any ideas. Fear? Fear of scarcity? The unknown? Lust for power? Greed? Losing status? Say it louder. Lack of recognition. These are all different reverberations of one common theme. And you know what the common theme is? Your instinctual self. In my theory, this is the instinctual life gone haywire, run amok. This is what happens when we strive to do more than satisfy our instinctual needs. We strive to achieve instinctual gratification. So, I'm not going to do a whole lot of this. Like, somebody had the answer, so like you're getting it. So I'm not going to talk too long about this. But my theory is that our instinctual life exists to assure our survival, right? And when our survival is threatened, there are different iterations about how we respond to that. And you named at least a half a dozen of them here just a few minutes ago. So what goes on when our survival is in question? I think the prefrontal cortex, which is the last part of the brain to develop and usually comes online between about 15 and 25 years old, goes into overdrive when we think our survival is threatened. And it causes us to act from our negative tendencies, to cause us to act in our own self-interest more and more and less in the interest of others over time. So, I developed a little mantra. You've heard it said that, like, idleness is the devil's playground. Everybody heard this growing up, right? Idleness is the devil's playground. You never heard that? Keep the kids busy or trouble will ensue. This is the way my mother used to say to me, keep yourself busy. Idleness is the devil's playground. But as I studied neurology in recent years, I came up with a better one. The prefrontal cortex is the devil's playground. And it really is. And you're going to see in the next few minutes why I know that to be the case. So let's talk about children for a little bit who have an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex relative to adults. Maybe it's true that a little child should lead us. Maybe Jesus got that one right. For me, the story of Sifu connects very closely with Jesus' exhortation that we must become as little children to enter the kingdom of heaven. Children act far more easily in terms of compassion and fairness and sharing and trust than we adults do. And I'm absolutely convinced this has to do with the fact that their prefrontal cortex is not yet developed. So they're operating from a different system within the brain than we adults do. But once that little devil comes online, that prefrontal cortex, those qualities become increasingly scarce, don't they? And individuals begin to start calculating cost-benefit relative to their own needs. That's the effect of a developing prefrontal cortex. This is why children behave differently in the world than adults. Their brains are different type of operating systems than adult brains. So Jesus' injunction to become as little children is counter to the tendency of the fully formed adult brain. This is why Jesus' teachings are so difficult for us. What Jesus is doing in much of his teaching is challenging us to overcome the hyperactive prefrontal cortex, to act to counter our nature. That's what he's asking us. Counter your nature, so that we may learn to live again in a type of second innocence. That, at least, is my neural explanation of Jesus' message. So, given that the prefrontal cortex is the devil's playground, and all of us are running around with the devil's playground in our brains, is all lost for us? Are we all destined to be Sifus? Oh, you're so optimistic this morning. That's fantastic. You anticipate my denouement. That's wonderful. Historically, evolutionary theorists have focused on Darwinian evolution as ruthlessness, a struggle for survival, which is why Tennyson said that nature is red in tooth and claw. But in his book, The Age of Empathy, primatologist Franz de Waal writes, "We have empathy, and that empathy is innate. And it cannot be eradicated or long suppressed. In fact," he says, "I'd argue that biology constitutes our greatest hope." Which is not what I've just been saying, is it? Biology constitutes our greatest hope. One can only shudder, he says, at the thought that the humanness of our societies depends on the whims of politicians, culture, and religion. Although I'd beg to differ with that last category. Biology constitutes our greatest hope. I actually agree with that, despite what I've said for the last 10 minutes. My mentor in evolutionary biology, who's now a dear friend of mine, I owe this man a great deal. He's taught me a lot. He and I were having lunch one day, and I said to him, "You know, Bill, I think psychology should have began with Darwin, not Freud." And he said, "Now you got it." And I think there's great wisdom in that. Biologists point out that very young children are innately sociable and helpful to others. Studies of 18-month-old toddlers show that they will almost always try to help any adult who's visibly struggling with the task. If you've raised young children, you know this. As early as the age of 2, if you have a young child in your presence and they see you struggling with the task, they're likely to drop everything they're doing and come help you, without even having to be asked to do so. But now, if the same adult forcefully throws something to the ground or just out of the way, toddlers won't try to retrieve the object because they understand that the action was deliberate and that the object was unwanted. Have you noticed this? This is true. So there is within us, at a very early age, an innate capacity for empathy and compassion and understanding and cooperation and helpfulness. But that tendency exists in tension with the prefrontal cortex, which has a tendency to calculate for my own sake, for my own regard, in service of my survival instinct. And we tend to think that these two things are counter to each other, but they're really not. So here's another story I'm going to share. Because I want to share this story because I want to answer this question. If the prefrontal cortex is such a problem for us and causes us to behave like Sifu, what is the antidote to that? How do we get back to a place within ourselves where the prefrontal cortex isn't dominant, and we can draw again upon those qualities that also exist inside us and that we exhibited when we were young human beings, trying to learn to live in the world. And we had natural empathy and natural compassion and natural cooperation, natural helpfulness. How do we get back there as adults? Well, here's another reading I want to share. There's another story about a community in Africa. This is a Zulu story. A young man became angry, stole some things from his neighbor, and then damaged the neighbor's home. The next day, the community gathered together, brought the young man before them, the entire town. And for a few minutes, there was silence as his friends and neighbors all looked at him. Then a woman rose and began to speak, and she said, "Jabari," this was the young man's name, "Jabari, I have known you all your life. I remember when you were a child, you would come and help me carry water from the river that I needed to cook my meals. Jabari, this is who you really are. You're a helpful one." Then Jabari's uncle rose next and said, "Jabari, I have known you all your life. When your father was ill, I watched you help take care of your brothers and your sisters, so your mother had time to care for your father. Jabari, this is who you really are. You are a good son." Another man rose and said, "Jabari, I've known you your whole life. You have been out in the forest with us many times to gather woods, to build houses, and to burn fires. You always do your part whenever asked. Jabari, this is who you really are. You are a man of this community." And for some time, the people of Jabari's community sat together and they told Jabari the story of who he really was. And they did this because stealing and being violent was not who they believed Jabari to be. And they wanted to remind him of his true self and of his place in the lives of the community. So rather than separate him, or believe this aberrant behavior now defined him. They embraced him and held him up to all the good that they had seen in him over the years. They held him lovingly accountable, and they held him in relationship. In other words, when they found an offender, they held up to the offender a reminder, a mnemonic mechanism that this is not who you truly are. Who you truly are is empathic and compassionate and helpful. You see what a different approach that is to how to deal with the sifus in our lives, the scoundrels in our lives? To foreground the best of the individual and background the behavior of offense, so that the whole humanness of the individual is what is seen. And what we tend to do, especially here in the West, we background those wonderful qualities about one another whenever there's an offense, and we foreground the behavior of the offense. And that gives us justification to demonize others, hold them accountable. Isn't that an incredibly different way of dealing with difficult people in our lives? And isn't that a much more wonderful way to deal with the difficult people in our lives? Do we really want to banish people the way Sifu was banished and shamed? And do we want people to comply out of threat and fear in order to be in community with us? I don't think so, but that's what we tend to do. We do it in the public square, we do it in our parenting, we do it, I think, a lot, especially here in the West. Why not bring people back into community by reminding them of the best of who they are? This, to me, is a beautiful, beautiful story, and it encapsulates the term Ubuntu, which is a Zulu term. Ubuntu describes a set of closely related values that emphasize the interconnectedness of individuals with their communities and the environment. This interconnectedness implies a set of human qualities, behaviors, values, that together constitute a shared understanding of what it means to be human. A shared understanding of what it means to be human. Those are important words. Here in the West, what it means to be a human being means to be an individualist who's autonomous and self-capable and assertive. In tribal cultures, what it means to be a human being is discovered in how we mirror with one another what is essential and best about us. So Ubuntu can be summarized with this phrase: I am because we are. My identity is found in you and through you, and your identity is found in me and through me. And together, Ubuntu encourages us to hold up the best qualities about us. It's a very different way of being in the world than we tend to exhibit here in the West, isn't it? And I think it shares a lot of the values we hold as Unitarian Universalists. Do you hear in Ubuntu the inherent worth and dignity of every person? I do. Do you hear a recognition of the importance of justice, equity, and compassion in human relations? I do. Do you hear the importance of community? Do you hear the importance of the interdependent web of which we're all a part? I do. So this is grist for our mill. And what I hope you do with this information is take it away and reflect just a little bit on how you deal with the scoundrels in your lives, how you deal with the difficult people who challenge you, How you deal with the people you would just assume discard than include because of their behavior, which doesn't align with your expectations of how they should show up in the world. We can either alienate or we can integrate. And I think integration through a reminder of the best qualities that exist in all of us is the best way forward for the scoundrels in our lives. All of them. All of them. Newsweek columnist Roger J. Samuelson recently wrote, "We face a choice between a society where people accept modest sacrifices for a common good, or a more contentious society where people selfishly protect their own benefits." We in the West are at that choice, and I think it's a choice that represents a potential cultural breaking point. I think we need to choose Ubuntu. All right. Let us go our way this morning, remembering to make beauty for one another and letting love have jurisdiction. Blessed be, folks. Who lights the chalice? Thank you, sir.